morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Paul Wiedefeld, Chairman of the Maryland Transportation Authority Board. I hereby call the meeting of the MDTA Board to order at 9 a.m. This morning we're having a meeting in person at MDTA headquarters in accordance with live streaming law. This meeting is being live streamed on the MDTA board webpage. I would like to say welcome to the members and staff who are with us today. For the record, I would like to state that Member Lee Gaines will be attending today's meeting via conference call. Thank you, Member Gaines. As a reminder, I ask that anyone who is in the room with us this morning should refrain from speaking unless you are presenting or answering a question to avoid background noise for the live stream. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no media who have pre-registered to comment at this morning's meeting. For those who are watching this meeting via the live stream, we have posted the materials for today's meeting on the MDTA board webpage so that you can follow along if you would like. Before we begin with today's agenda, I would like to take a moment to honor and remember former MDTA Executive Director Joey Sagal, who passed away unexpectedly a few weeks ago. Please join me in a moment of silence for Joey's honor. Thank you. And I also wanted to thank the entire team. I know both in terms of dealing with, obviously, we're sorry of grief, of losing Joey. You remain focused, on our core mission, obviously, to provide safety for all everyone who uses the system. So thank you for everything you've done. I would like to introduce Percy Dangerfield, MDTA's Acting Executive Director. Percy has been with the MDTA for the past 10 years, and prior to his role was MDTA's Chief Administrative Officer. Percy has worked in the public sector for 25 years and is a great asset to the MDTA. Welcome, Percy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
We will now begin today's agenda. Agenda item number 1 is the approval of the open session meeting minutes of October 26th.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The second agenda item is the approval of the closed session meeting number 1, meeting minutes of October 26th.
Make a motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The third agenda item is approval of the closed session number 2, meeting minutes of October 26th.
So moved. Second.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
The fourth agenda item is approval of contract award HB 3001, clean and painting the Hayden Bridge. Jeffrey Davis.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeff Davis, Deputy Director with the MDTA Division of Procurement. And I'm here today to seek contingent approval to execute contract number HB 3001-0000 for the cleaning and painting and miscellaneous structural repairs of the US 40 bridge over the Susquehanna River. The work to be performed under this contract is located on the Thomas J. Hayden Memorial Bridge, US Route 40 over the Susquehanna. The scope of work includes replacement of protective coating system on the structural steel members and performing miscellaneous structural repairs on the bridge. We received, I just want to verify, we received 8 bids. The lowest bid was responsive and responsible. It was from Blastic Enterprises Incorporated for $56,861,520, which was 6% below our engineer's estimate. They have committed to the 16% MBE goal and 1% VSBE goal of this contract. Do you have any questions?
When was the last time that the bridge was painted, Jeff? Do you know?
Do not have the date, but I believe
If I know.
I can get that for you.
When's this complete? How long will it supposed to last? Let's put it that way.
Once we apply these coatings, how long will they last? Could I defer to Jim? Would you be able to assist? I don't want to misquote.
Hi, Member Cox. Jim Harkness, Chief Engineer. So I think in terms of the exact dates, I'll have to get back to you. For the last time we painted this bridge, but it has been, I think, over 20 years. I would say. And then so the coating is also expected to have a life of over 20 years. So you know, we've gotten the full life out of that, the coatings on the system on that bridge.
I know major repairs were done probably around 10 years ago on that bridge. My guess is somewhere around that.
We had a redecking project. We had a redecking project in around 2008, 2010. Yep.
Always a question, you know, about major leagues, always comes up anyhow. And you said repairs are necessary, will be done, this is, good, fine.
Correct. The scope of this contract is to repair any known structural issues and to reapply the necessary coatings.
Anything else?
I just have two quick questions. Member Cuss just asked the one life cycle, and you answered that. I appreciate that. The other two questions I had, one is the compliance follow-up on the execution of the contract. And first of all, I think that you, okay, I'm sorry about that. I think, first of all, your team, they're doing a great job. And, I'm not questioning that. I just had two points I'd like to clarify a little bit in terms of the compliance. Are our people doing the compliance, like, auditing the work with our team, I guess our project management team?
Yes. There's kind of two factors. The contractor, the prime contractor, is required to be certified in these coding systems in order to meet the minimum qualifications for this contract. So there are people on the contractor's staff who will do quality control. And then we will have our own in-house contract management team to inspect the work
Okay.
and sign off on it.
And then on miscellaneous repairs, is there a scope of work for that?
So the reason behind the miscellaneous repairs is we may get underneath some of these coatings and find damage we were not aware of, so that the contractor will then, present their findings to us. Our in-house construction management team will verify and prove that contractor replaces it. So to keep the project moving, instead of pausing to bring in another firm, they can complete the work and maintain the schedule.
Okay, thank you. They're my questions. Thank you for.
No problem.
Just thank you for that. We actually had some pretty good discussion at the Capital Committee on this, and we're actually going to have an educational session come at a future CapCom meeting just to address some of those questions, so we better understand going forward.
Right.
Very good.
So I'll make a motion to approve that contract.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Agenda item number 5, an update on all open contracts. Jeffrey as well?
Yes, sir. Give me a moment to switch files. Oh, I had it open. I accidentally closed it. Bear with me. There it is. Okay. Thank you so much for your patience with that. I was having a computer issue. So I'm just going to read off a bunch of information and numbers. Stop me if I need to repeat anything or if I trip over commas again. So the types of contracts, we have memorandums of understandings. We have 15 active contracts for a total value of $27,045,293. For A&E contracts, we have 69 open contracts for a total of $765,500,000. For construction contracts, we have 39 open contracts for a total of $1,708,995,503.23. For maintenance contracts, we have 26 open contracts for a total amount of $33,611,230.85. For services contracts, we have 24 open contracts for a total of $43,964,888.65. And for IT contracts, we have 31 open contracts with a total amount of $153,230,133.26. This is a total contract of 200, there's a 204 total contracts, for a total contract amount of $2,732,347,347,048.99. Of that amount, $1,684,439, these commas again, forgive me, $1,684,439,673.39 has been paid to date on those open contracts. For POs, obligated amounts that we still have to pay out, $714,420,467.42. And open unencumbered amounts on the contracts, or the remaining balances on the BPOs, would be $333,486,908.18. Anybody need me to repeat any of those numbers? Maybe I'll get a projector next
Yeah,
time.
Jeff, just to be clear, so basically, these are contracts that have been approved by the board
Correct.
prior. This is just a high-level overview of where we are in
Yes, this
burning
is-
through those dollars.
It's a,
Okay,
yep,
just
it's a
so,
quarterly update, and then
Gotcha.
I try to break
Appreciate
down
that.
those numbers to
Yep.
make them tangible for you.
yeah. Any questions or comments from the board? All right, thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, everyone.
The sixth agenda item is to approve of the Canton Railroad. Ms. Sharpless?
Good morning. For the record, I'm Deborah Sharpless, MDTA's Executive Director. The purpose of this agenda item is to seek your approval for the selection of Canton Board of Directors as well as the chairman. If you recall, MDTA is the sole shareholder of Canton, and as such, our responsibility is to select the Board of Directors. And so pending your approval of our recommendation, myself or someone else at the agency will sit in at Canton's annual stockholder meetings and serve as your proxy to vote in the members, the directors. Member Cox is your ex officio member on the Canton board. He will be present as well. And so we recommend three, call them appointments. Two of them are brand-new appointments. One of them is a reappointment. The Canton, in the past, we fluctuated back and forth between either 6 directors or 7. It's all dependent upon, do we have a good skill set available? Canton is certainly supportive of 7, and if the skill sets align with what they're looking for, in the past, the board's approved 7. So the approval of the 3 that we're recommending will bring them to 7 in total. So the first person that we are recommending for appointment is Charlie Sung, and the second person is Thomas Huseman. These members have been vetted by Member Cox and Member Von Paris, and also a current director at Canton, Director Kaufman. And these gentlemen strongly endorse these individuals. Their qualifications have been included in your materials. We also recommend the reappointment of Robert Huber, Sr., Member Cox, Director Kaufman, and the CEO Barnes all endorse the reappointment of him. So similar to our board, Canton tries to have a diverse board, represents their community, represents different expertise, and the addition of these 2 new members, as well as the reappointment of Director Huber, would accomplish that. So with that, this is an approval item, but Member Cox, is an ex officio head. So, I guess.
Questions or comments?
I can strongly, obviously, endorse these 2 new people. As Deb said, Member Von Paris has vetted these people, and so has person we recommend as chairman, Steve Kaufman, and the current executive director, Paul Burns. If you look at their diverse people have been on there, we tried to get finance people in as far as legal as Steve Kaufman. Bob Huber has been on the Port Commission before, and I think in the new appointees are familiar with the port, familiar with the railroad, actually. So I endorse the appointment and reappointment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Just more of a question. So if it's a 6-person board, what happens in the event of a tie? What are the bylaws say?
Here's how it works. It's sort of, member Rosen, when I went on as the representative, replaced Bill Hellman, and then he actually was on the Canton Railroad Board. And so I got my first meeting. I said, can I vote or I just sit here? And they said, well, you'll find out later. So, okay, I said, okay, find out later. So they sat down, gave me the rules and regulations of Canton Railroad. So no matter how many members, if they all vote one way, there's one member that can veto all that. And that's the member representing MDTA. So basically, there's been no problem, Member Rosen, at this point, as far as, working together as a team. And I think the new chairman, who is a very inclusive person, Mr. Kaufman, I think should be no problem.
And so those bylaws exist, that, largely what goes in front of the Canton Board are significant matters, and so for significant decisions that could really affect the operations, the financial viability of the company, the MDTA ex officio member has the ability to, they have to have his concurrence. So, to date, it's probably only significant items that fall under Member Cox's purview that have gone. But in the event that there was a really, less significant issue, then they normally do go by a majority.
Right, correct.
So.
Mr. Chair, I just have a couple of
Sure.
comments.
Good.
I was asked to participate in this evaluation, and I did have a virtual interview with Charlie Sung, and I had an in-person interview with Thomas Huseman. And as far as Charlie Sung, just a couple of things. Very familiar with a lot of experience, a tremendous, would be a tremendous asset, strong leader, understands the insurance industry, complex commercial litigation, executive editor, George Washington International Law Review, and Dean's List of Johns Hopkins. So, as you probably are aware, on the board of trustees, Howard County General Hospital. But he is very much experienced in handling and making decisions in very complex issues and problems. And I like that. And on the other candidate, Thomas Huseman, what really stuck out to me was, his level of management in the fields that we really need help in. I feel rail, ocean carrier services, and trucking, transportation. So I think they're strong, very strong candidates, and so I support this.
Great. Yes.
First of all, thank you for providing us with the information. It's very informative, but just to add on, I know how committed Member Cox and Member Von Paris have been to the MDTA. So based on their vetting and their recommendation, if you're ready, I would
Yes.
like to so move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. The next item is an update on traffic and revenue forecast updates. Ms. Sharpless?
Yes, good morning again. So we're going to use the PowerPoint slide that's been provided to you, and we can start on slide 2. So annually, a new traffic and revenue forecast is prepared by independent TNR consultants. Our consultants are CDM Smith. So today, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the most recent TNR forecast. And this presentation, along with a member from CDM Smith, was presented at the Finance Committee and discussed in greater detail. Okay, so if we turn to slide 2, the current forecast totals $5.6 billion over the time period of fiscal year '24 through '29. That is up 7% from the prior forecast. The majority of the increase, $320 million, is due to the legacy facilities. So legacy is everything except for the ICC and the ETLs. So if we turn to slide 3, total system revenue reflects a $354 million increase. The key drivers in the increase is first rebenching traffic and revenue through the forecast period. This, you almost call this like a true up. If you recall, in prior years, we had been overachieving, particularly in the Easy Pass revenue area. So that's what they mean by rebenchmarking. And then also, a shorter than anticipated NOTD backlog processing period, which they're expecting to result in near-term increases in revenue. The prior forecast assumed that the processing would be through fiscal year '24. And so that's positive, but we do have to recognize that that is a big assumption in our forecast. You know, the new part for us that we just don't have as much experience with is, you know, what is the collection cycle for video tolls? What is the time period that it takes? When we went to AET, it was during COVID. We dealt with a backlog. We had a transition. You know, that normal processing time period, we haven't had a very large window of that to really have some experience. And so as such, you know, as with every single forecast that we get, Alan's going to present our financial forecast shortly, you know, it's based on the best information that we have available at this time. But that is a key assumption in the forecast, and we just need time to see if that video toll revenue is going to materialize in the years that they're expecting, which is the sooner years as opposed to stretching out collections longer. So I'm not concerned at the moment that, you know, the revenue won't be collected. It's more of a concern from a timing perspective. And so, let me
Ms. Sharpless, if I could, do you have a sense of when you will feel that we have better data on that video?
in, let me get my map, January, February, because we.
Of '24?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this January, February.
Okay.
When you look at your graphs, you can see the uptick in '24. Is that uptick really going to happen, or is it flatter, right? That's part of what we're talking about. And so the reason that we don't have a better sense for it right this minute is from a forecast perspective, where we're comparing our forecast to actuals, we really only have 1 to 2 months of comparison, because the forecast for July through September, they just true it up to actuals. So we don't have that comparison as to how we're doing. And, you know, later on, when I do the traffic and revenue update, we're trailing behind the forecast right now. But, you know, again, I'm basing it, if I look at through October, you know, you can't make a judgment on a year based on 1 month. So it's something we just got to really be mindful of. Okay. So let's see, let's turn to slide 4, which is the ICC and the ETLs. This revenue increased by $7 million. The forecast removed the COVID-19 recovery assumptions, which basically means that our forecast is what's our new normal. You know, that we don't have these layers of other risk factors layer in like we used to. The assumption, what does that mean? It means that from our perspective, the economic recovery from COVID is complete and we're back to normal operations. You also see positive impacts related to the northbound ETL's extension opening up in phases. That's also reflected in the forecast, as well as the work that the Office of Engineering Construction does. When they have capital projects, they're extremely mindful of the impacts they cause on traffic. They do their best to minimize that to the extent possible, while also balancing the cost of the projects. And they're mindful of not trying to interrupt traffic at multiple facilities, particularly harbor crossings, at the same time. So their actions also help us from a revenue perspective. So moving to the bottom of the page, administrative revenue increased by $26 million. The drivers of that is anticipated higher civil penalty revenue because of MVA flagging and then the completing the backlog. When any transactions aren't paid, you end up issuing civil penalties. Also, we've been seeing positive customer payment and action right now. So that's also driving it. Now, if we move to slide 5, which is the comparison of the previous forecast to the most recent, you'll note that over the 10-year period, there's a $478 million increase compared to the previous. Again, that is related to largely the enforcement piece, the escalations with MVA. CCU has tax intercept programs. It's all that normal activity that has happened, since our statute's been in place for video tolling. We're seeing that. We're seeing the impacts of that. So the remainder of the forecast, once we get beyond 25, remains about 5 to 6% higher than the previous forecast, for the reasons we already talked about. And let me just double check that I haven't missed anything. I don't believe so.
And the full report's here as
Yes.
well.
Yes. Thank you, Member Chairman. Yes, the entire CDM Smith report is provided in your materials. The PowerPoint is a summary.
Any questions or comments? I just have one. You mentioned getting back to normal after or COVID. Is there a new normal, I guess? And how's that compared to the old normal, if
Yeah.
there is a change?
Generally, our traffic volumes are back to pre-COVID levels.
Okay.
And so when we think about, what was the revenue impact to us? If you remember our curves, right, we had I'm use my hands for a second. Our curve might have been here, November 2019's forecast. And then we had this dip that went down. So now we're coming back up here. So this revenue, that's gone. That never happened, right? But then what also the impact of COVID is it was normal for us to have growth of 1% year over year. So even though our volumes are back to pre-COVID, they're not back where they might have been had we had that growth, right? That's where we are. So, but generally our forecast has a 1% growth. We're back to that. Something we have to be really mindful of is commercial traffic. A huge part that helped us during COVID was commercial, stayed fairly strong. It was the passenger vehicles that had dropped so much. We are seeing a decrease in this, the short time period that we're looking at. We are seeing a decrease in commercial traffic. So from a commuter perspective, a peak time period and all that, you don't see much change, but because trucks drive all hours of the day, but the heavy vehicles, the tractor trailers particularly, they impact our revenue significantly, and we're starting to see that fall. Now, is that a slight blimp, and it's going to rebound right back up, or is it going to continue to drop off? Very often, truck traffic is a leading indicator.
Have you seen any change in peak passenger traffic on Fridays and Mondays? Or that you've,
I don't,
that you know of?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
You know, very often, in finance, we're looking at traffic a little more monthly, you
Okay,
know,
yeah,
but.
yeah. Now, the only reason I'm relating to this is because in the transit arena, there is a new normal, right? And it's significantly changed, particularly on the Mondays and Fridays. Just when we look at revenues, you know, we look at passengers / and revenues, it's significant. And so that's the new normal, and we're not necessarily going to go back to the old normal, and that has revenue implications. I just want to make sure that if there's anything going on here, it sounds like we don't have enough data yet to support one or the other, I guess.
Yeah, it's more, we get, the finance division, you know, particularly the revenue unit, we can certainly compare, you know, Mondays to Mondays and, you know, Tuesdays to Tuesdays, and see if we're seeing any change. You know, generally, when we're analyzing, you know, we're looking at things on a monthly basis. So if there is this
May just be
this
spread
shift,
out,
it's spreading out. We
Gotcha.
don't have a decrease.
Right, gotcha. As when someone uses the west side of the Beltway, I can tell you it changes on Mondays and Fridays. Very good. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, just,
I had a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gaines.
I see in here that there is no future toll rate changes are anticipated for the next 10 years. That's not too realistic, is it?
The traffic and revenue forecast does not assume toll increases. You know, they will
Right.
not incorporate a toll increase in our forecast until we tell them to do so. And we would never tell them to do so until after the board approves a, you know, a change in toll rates. Now, that's a
Right.
different question than our financial forecast that Alan's going to present to say, based on the current information, when do we anticipate needing a toll increase? Because we break our debt service coverage and we're approaching our bond cap, you know, and so the timing of that, if you don't mind, Member Gaines, Alan will address in the financial forecast.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb, thank you for providing the information. Just, I'm a little surprised to hear that they're projected that we're going to be back to pre-COVID levels, especially on the commuter. How are they factoring in the work from home aspect?
But, so I'm talking about on a revenue perspective, right? We definitely have seen a shift, you know, that less people are having commuter plans, more people are choosing the Easy Pass discount, the 25% discount, you know. So, you know, at times our volumes, you know, one bucket is up, another bucket's down and all that, but from a total perspective, we're where we were.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Deb. The eighth item is the fiscal year 2025 preliminary operating budget. Mr. Brown?
Okay, good morning. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Brown, Budget Director of the MDTA. I'm here today to request contingent approval to the MDTA Board for the fiscal year 25 preliminary operating budget. The preliminary operating budget is $421.4 million, which represents a $21.3 million or 5.3% increase versus fiscal 2024. Overall, the key drivers are the mandated personnel expenses, Easy Pass Service Center costs, engineering costs, and insurance premiums. To better understand the budget, we've broken it into three major buckets: mandated increases, discretionary additions, and discretionary reductions. On the mandated increases, the total increase is $9.4 million. The primary drivers are two COLAs, a police COLA of 5% worth $2.6 million, civilian COLA of 2%, which is increasing the budget $1.6 million. In addition, the Maryland State Police have personnel and overhead rate increases totaling $2.3 million, and our expected on-time step increases for all employees are expected to add $1.7 million. In addition, employee and law enforcement officers' pension costs are up $0.8 million. Overtime is up $0.5 million, primarily due to the vacancies. Social Security is up $0.4 million, and all others show a decrease of $0.5 million. Those other areas are things like reclasses, some other fringe costs, accrued leave, things of that nature. Moving on to discretionary spending, the increase is $14.8 million. I just want to note the first three areas I'll be talking about are part of discretionary additions. However, they do have some strong mandated characteristics to them. First, Easy Pass Service Center cost increased $4.4 million. Let me say that again, $4 million, increased $4 million. The increase reflects updated transaction volumes, the all-electronic toll lane administration, and various cost assumptions. This is contractual in nature, so it's driven, like I said, like mandated characteristics, it's driven by assumptions around volumes, transactions, how many lanes are being administered, so that drives a lot of the cost. Engineers account for a $2.9 million increase. These are additional compliance costs, project costs, and updated market rates. Again, the characteristics I mentioned, you notice with the compliance costs and market rates. Finally, insurance and premiums increased $1.9 million due to market cost pressures. Again, very strong mandated characteristics, things that in the short term are hard to adjust. Moving on, I'd like to mention the next two, telephone system updates and telecom lines. Both had increases. The telephone systems were for some software and equipment enhancements, and increased $0.6 million. But this, as well as the telecom lines, were previously budgeted in a different object, 812, which is building repairs and maintenance. This is probably a more accurate way to do it. However, you probably should look at it in total. I'll note that later when we get to that line. Telecom lines increased $0.5 million due to traffic control contractual costs. Again, this is another line that was previously budgeted in building repairs and maintenance. Radios and electronic equipment increased $0.5 million due to the Communication Electronics Incorporated contract. Management studies and consultants increased $0.5 million. This is primarily due to analysis around MDTA's environmental, social, and governance factors. Electricity increased $0.4 million. This is to align it more with historical activity. This is more in alignment with the actuals for fiscal 2023. Turnover expense increased $0.4 million. That's really a reduction in a credit, and this is because as we are anticipating to fill vacancies, the turnover rate is being reduced. Finally, the remaining increases total $3.1 million, and this is across various multiple lines such as security services, software maintenance, cell phones, things of that nature. Moving on to the discretionary reductions, the total is $2.9 million. A major driver was vehicle purchases, which decreased $1.1 million. This is due to the completion of the purchase of the collective bargaining vehicles. So now we're reverting to a more like normal operational activity level. As mentioned, building repairs and maintenance decreased $0.8 million. Again, this is due to the realignment of previously budgeted items that we mentioned before, telecom lines and telephone. In total, we're talking across all those three objects of a $0.3 million increase, rather than what you saw before. Fiscal services, credit card fees decreased $0.3 million. This is to align it with the expected traffic and revenue forecast. And all other reductions total $0.7 million is across multiple items like replacement maintenance and building equipment, gas and oil, et cetera. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Mr. Brown, just one, or two actually. One on the insurance premiums, do you have a sense of the percentage increase? It says 1.9 million, but I don't.
Yeah, bear with me a second here. I think I can. Yeah, that's a big increase. It's about like 41% increase.
41%. That's why I was wondering what's going on in the insurance world.
Yeah, and there was, the prior year, if you remember, we had a very large increase again. And so a little bit later in the agenda, we're going to do an update item about insurance. We discussed with the Finance Committee our strategy, what we thought we should be doing to try to handle some of these, very significant rising costs. And we've taken action on that. And so I'll be happy to share that with you as soon as we get to that agenda item. And, so the.
Thank you. I just know with the trust fund, I'm dealing with some issues on the insurance side. That's what I was wondering.
Yes.
All right, and this is just a simple question since I wasn't here last December. So it's preliminary approval? And then, so what's the process?
Well, I'd say it's contingent, well, we have the preliminary, and obviously the final is next summer, but it's called contingent because DBM typically gives us updated fringe rates. So usually report
gotcha.
back to the board and say, this is the effect.
Great, okay, thank you. All right, so do we have a motion? Second?
Member Arndinger, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Aye.
Agenda item number 9 is the final fiscal year 24-29 CTP approval. Ms. Stump?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jennifer Stum, for the record, the Assistant Capital Program Manager. Today, I'm presenting the proposed fiscal year 24-29 final CTP and seeking your approval. This was also presented to the Capital Committee on November 2nd and to the Finance Committee on November 9th. The proposed 6-year fiscal year 24-29 final CTP is $3.1 billion. This reflects a net increase of $393.1 million as seen on Attachment 1, Line 6. The net increase is a result of the following. An increase in the 6-year CTP budget by $780,000 for the Nice Middleton Bridge, which is Attachment 1, Line 1. An increase in the 6-year CTP budget by $4.9 million for the I-95 ETL Northern Extension, which is Attachment 1, Line 2. An increase in the 6-year CTP budget by $177.9 million for all projects except the Nice Middleton Bridge, the I-95 ETL Northern Extension, and the reserves, which is Attachment 1, Line 3. And an increase in the allocated and unallocated reserves by $209.5 million, which is shown on Attachment 1, Line 4. The fiscal year 2023 expenditures were $451.7 million versus the $484.8 million budgeted in the fiscal year 24-29 draft CTP, as reflected on Line 6 of Attachment 1. The fiscal year 23 underspending was $33.1 million and has been rolled over into the final CTP. Highlights of the project and reserve changes are shown in Attachment 2. For added new projects, we added seven system preservation projects and 1 environmental project for an increase of $9.3 million in the fiscal year 24-29 period. For projects that had modified budgets to reflect bids received, we adjusted 1 project to reflect bids received that were higher than the engineer's estimate for a net increase of $4.2 million. For added construction phases, the construction phase of 5 projects were funded for a total of $68.4 million, transferred from the reserves as design reached 60% level and cost estimates were developed on fully developed scopes. For modified budgets to reflect completed projects, 13 projects were completed and 2 projects were deleted for a total decrease of $100,000 in the fiscal year 24-29 period. For projects modified due to cost changes and cash flow adjustments, adjusted cash flows and funding changes in engineering, right-of-way, and/or construction budgets for 85 projects for a net budget increase of $101.8 million in the fiscal year 24-29 period. And for reserve changes, the allocated reserves increased by $209.4 million and the unallocated reserves increased by $87,000. On Attachment 3, it details where the projects are by facility. There are 32% at Kennedy Highway, 24% in multi-area, 12% at the William Preston Lane Memorial Bridge, 12% at Baltimore Harbor Tunnel, 7% at the Key Bridge, 6% at the Fort McHenry Tunnel, and 2% each at the ICC Hayden Bridge and Nice Bridge. On attachment number 4, it details the projects by category. There's 34% in structure preservation, 25% in safety and capacity improvements, 16% in highway preservation, 6% in enhancements, 4% in campus facility improvements, 4% in campus facility preservation, 4% in bridge replacements, 3% in tunnel preservation, 2% in environmental, and 1% in the unallocated reserves. And if there's any questions?
Any questions, comments? I want to thank the Capital Committee, obviously, for the work they're doing with that. Very good. All right, is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Tum.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10, approval of the debt policy. Mr. Gorman?
Thank you. I'm Alan Garman. This is an approval item. We're seeking approval to raise the unrestricted cash target in the debt policy from $350 million to $400 million. This was reviewed in detail with the Finance Committee on November 9th, and they support the policy change. Management's recommending the increase to support prudent reserves and also to meet toll sector ratings methodologies that require our unrestricted cash to essentially equal or approximate our annual operating budget. A few key points is that the unrestricted cash target has not been raised since 2009, but should be upwardly revised periodically for growth in the agency and inflation. The increased cash reserve is necessitated by the rating agency metric for toll sector entities in the AA ratings category. Essentially, they want that unrestricted cash position to equal your operating budget, and it's a notching factor to the credit rating. So if it falls below 365 days of cash, they could potentially notch down your credit rating. The importance of the low, the other key points is that the highest possible credit ratings in the AA ratings category ensure our bond market access at the lowest possible financing rates. And this is a question that's often raised, is that why do we need the lowest financing rates? And they're critically important because they support some combination of a larger capital program or lower required toll rates. And I guess the final key point is that the carrying cost of maintaining the larger cash reserve is less than the long-term costs associated with financing if we were a lower rated borrower. So that's something that we looked at and discussed in detail with the Finance Committee. Our current unrestricted cash position is adequate to meet the days cash on hand metric for the ratings category, but it will need to rise within the 6-year program period. Most likely by fiscal 25 or 26, it would need to rise to maintain that metric. We've estimated that the increased cash reserve will have minimal short-term impact on debt service coverage, our debt limit, and funds available for capital spending. In the long term, though, the financing savings as a higher-rated borrower will result in improved debt service coverage and lower debt outstanding. So we're seeking approval of this revision of the debt policy, and I'll open it to questions.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Richardson.
Yeah, Alan, thank you for the presentation. So at the Finance Committee, you clarified how we're going to phase into this, because we're not going to do this all at once. Can you just clarify that for the board, how we're going to step into the 400?
So we have a couple of options. We can transfer funds into that, we essentially maintain that $350 million reserve within our general account, the M&O reserve. And so we can move the money all at once, or we can move it monthly as we have excess operating revenues and build up the $50 million. So we have some financial flexibility to do it as we see fit. From an investment perspective, because I wear multiple hats here, it's easier if we shift it at one time, because on the investment side, we're trying to manage to a benchmark, and we need to maintain sort of a
a consistent average maturity in the general account. That's where the extra 50 million would reside. So essentially, we can move it in phases and buy several investments to maintain that same consistent average maturity. Or if we move it at one time, we would buy larger pieces of investments to maintain that. So we have that flexibility, and I think that's something we'll manage through on the investment side and with Deb and the investment committee.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion for approval? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Fiscal year 24-29 fiscal financial forecast. Mr. Gorman, you're going to cover that for us?
Thank you. I'm filling in for Chantel Green today, who's out of the office. We're seeking approval of the 6-year financial forecast that extends through fiscal 29. The forecast was discussed in detail and recommended for approval by the Finance Committee. Our projections demonstrate financial goals and legal covenants are met through fiscal 28, but our declining debt service coverage may necessitate a toll increase by fiscal 29, and this is based on the most current information available. Additional considerations for future revenue needs are also a function of the $3 billion bonding limit that is approached at near the end of the program period. This forecast is an improvement from our June forecast that modeled a toll increase need as a function of debt service coverage a year earlier in fiscal 28. The forecast is subject to continuous revisions based on our realized revenues and capital spending that drive the ultimate timing. The key inputs to our forecast, we've discussed several of them today. The traffic and revenue forecast produced by our external consultant, CDM Smith, our 6-year CTP or capital program budget, and the fiscal 25 operating budget. And then within the forecast, we have modeled projected increases in operating costs annually. The table in this item highlights some key legal requirements in the trust agreement and state law, as well as the debt policy goals. So in the trust agreement, we have our core rate covenant, and that requires that net revenues have to exceed debt service by 1.2 times. In state law, we have a bonding limitation of $3 billion. And then within the debt policy, we have goals for debt service coverage. We have a 2 times coverage goal, and then the unrestricted cash reserve position that we just discussed. It's interesting that there's some changes since our last June forecast, and I think it kind of helps appreciate how quickly the items or the forecast can change based on this incoming revenue and capital spending data. You know, since the June forecast, revenue estimates are up during the 6-year period by $293 million. The lower and delayed financings is a function of the higher net revenues and pay-go capital spending. There's a $35 million reduction in debt service, and that's despite an increase in the financing rate assumption. So in this forecast, we raised our kind of longer-term financing rate assumption from 4% to 4.75%, and that's just a function of prevailing higher rates. The revenue increase and interest savings are exceeded, unfortunately, by the $36 million operating budget increase and the $393 million increase in the capital budget. So we're seeking approval of this financial forecast, and I'll open it to questions.
Any questions or comments? Again, thank you, the Finance Committee as well. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you so much.
Aye.
And you're going to pinch hit one more time?
I am.
Okay, for
It's very
biannual
convenient
revenue.
for me. I don't have to get up
That's
and
right,
down.
thank you.
So this is a companion item. It's our biannual review of revenue sufficiency, and it's required by the board's operating policy. Where essentially, we're trying to demonstrate that we're maintaining adequate coverage, our financial goals that are outlined in the debt policy, and the legal constraints that we just discussed. So what we're showing is that revenue is essentially sufficient to meet. These are legal covenants and goals in the debt policy. And I think the table helps to highlight some of the key metrics for revenue sufficiency and when we have rising revenue needs. But in the near term, for the next several years, there's adequate revenue to meet all of our legal constraints and also our policy goals in the debt policy. So this is just an update item. There's no approval needed, so I'd open it to any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Next is an update on the independent auditors report. Ms. Sharpless?
Month of finance is always heavy. I mean, the month of November, which feels like the month of finance, it's always heavy in November. So this agenda item is about our financial statements. This item was also presented at the Finance Committee by the independent financial statement auditors, Clifton Larson Allen. So I'll be presenting this to you today at the board meeting. So the first thing is we received an unmodified opinion, in other words, a clean opinion. When we walk through the PowerPoint, I think makes the most sense. Let's see, so I'm going to jump to slide 3. It's actually 4 because of the title page. You know, key areas of the audit included investments, capital assets and leases, long-term debt, bonds, essentially, revenue, intergovernment relationships, and financial reporting, and then a new GASB that came into effect, which has to do with subscriptions for IT. If you remember last year, we dealt with leases, was the big effort. So this year, it was GASB 96. They do some internal control work, and they evaluate internal controls for significant account balances and certain classes of transactions. We had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified. And remember, from this context, from an internal controls perspective, it's whether or not the weakness, if it existed, would have a material likelihood of causing a material misstatement in the financial statements. So the auditors also did their required communications. First, when it comes to significant accounting policies, depreciation, method for estimating revenue, any of those policies, we were consistent with prior years. They focused a lot on estimates, because there's more judgment involved in estimates. Difficulties encountered during the audit, there were none. When it came to uncorrected misstatements, management chose to not record 2 entries. We discussed them with the Finance Committee. They were both very immaterial entries, and when they were identified by tying together the last of schedules, it was just identified very, very late in the process. And so when you weighed the immateriality to the statement to the level of effort to go back and redo an enormous amount of work, it couldn't be justified to do them. Those entries have since been corrected in fiscal year 24. We did not book any corrected misstatements, meaning that these 2 entries were the only errors that were identified. There were no disagreements with management. We did not utilize consultants. And there were no significant issues discussed with management, and management provide the representation letter as is required. Things the auditors have advised us about, is there's 2 more GASBs coming out, Omnibus 2022 and compensated absences. The Finance Division doesn't believe the adoptions of either one of these will have a material misstatement. So with that, that's our financial statement audit. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments? Thank you. The next item, again, Ms. Sharpless, is on the service organization control.
Yes. Okay, so this is presenting to you 3 different audits. Okay? They involve CAPS and TransCore. CAPS receives a SOC 1 Type 2 audit. TransCore receives a SOC 1 Type 2 and a SOC 2 Type 2 audit. So the first thing is, let's talk about the types for a second, Type 1 and Type 2. We choose to do, for the SOC 2, we choose to do a Type 2. For SOC 1, I'd say we need to do it. And what that means is when they're going through the procedures, we're not only communicating what our procedures are, our assertions about controls, they're testing them for a period of time to ensure that those procedures are in place. I'd say that's the big distinction between a Type 2 and a Type 1 audit. So if we go down to the PowerPoint, the audit periods for all three of these audits was fiscal year 23, July 1st through June 30th, 2023. When conducting the SOC 1 audit, on the TransCore side, there were 11 control objectives that were tested, and on the CAP side, 5. Again, both audits received an unmodified opinion. The SOC 2 audit, same audit period. This was the second year we've ever done a SOC 2 audit. The findings, there was one of the findings from the SOC 1 audit was also a finding in the SOC 2. So we have overlap. So no new findings that were not already identified in SOC 1 were identified. That we also had an unmodified opinion. So on slide 5, we talk a little bit about the difference between a SOC 1 and SOC 2. So a SOC 1 audit focused on internal controls related to financial reporting. And that's what I mean by we have to do it, is because of the work that TransCore and CAPS does for us, the financial statement auditors need that SOC 1 audit so that they know that they can rely on the output of those systems that are then brought into our financial statements. So that's the primary reason for the SOC 1 audit. A SOC 2 audit is focused on information and IT. A lot of times people say it's more like the trust principles. The trust usually focuses around security, confidentiality, information privacy, processing integrity, and availability. And so we do both of these audits. The SOC 2 is coming into play more and more. Like one of the things that we do is DMV lookups. If someone video tolls, right, we take the license plate, we go to the DMV, and we do the lookup. More and more DMVs are requiring a SOC 2 audit in order to do that lookup. And, so the time, the effort, everything else associated with SOC 2 compared to what it would cost to obtain that information in other means is well worth the SOC audit. So we've been doing, that's what made us start doing them, and this being our second year. So on slide 6, list those different areas that we're focused on. I'll jump to the next slide, which is, what findings did we end up having? All of these findings, except for one, have been addressed already. The first one involved CAPS. Their password and fail attempt wasn't meeting the state requirements. That's since been corrected. The next, that's the only finding that CAPS had. The other 3 findings related to TransCore. Now, one of the things that's important to note, because the first one you'll see has to do with account creation. 1 out of 8 that was looked at did not have the terms and conditions signed. Okay, in these SOC audits, there's no discretion, there's no materialities. It's either it was done exactly as it's supposed to, or it was not. And that's why you'll see that a finding, if it's one occurrence, it's still a finding. So that was the first one. The second one had to do with security awareness training. TransCore has 2 layers of security training that they provided, And so in one of these cases, 2 out of the 10 users, the acknowledgement form was not signed. The testing, the training was done, but they didn't have the documentation where they signed the form. This was the finding that was also in the SOC 2 audit. And then the last one, and David Goldsboro is working very closely with TransCore on this. I can't honestly say we have full agreement on this finding, but as of right now, it's a finding that there wasn't backup for restoring, that was done. And this really has to do with a frequency, that there's backup and testing and tabletops and all that's done every year. But then you start doing more intensive testing. Well, the more intensive isn't done every single year. And so that's a little bit of what David's working with the auditors on, so that we can make sure that we all have the same expectations as to what makes the most sense. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding these SOC audits.
Any questions? Member Rosen?
Thanks, Deb, for the presentation. So after Caption TransCore make or address the findings, how do we verify that they've made that and are maintaining consistently doing that going forward?
So the one, and I'm sorry, I just can't recall right this second which one has not been addressed yet. So out of these 4 findings, we verified that 3 of them have been put in place already. With the terms and conditions piece, I'm aware that operations is doing some work to kind of like go through the whole customer base and figure out, do we have any others? For this particular one, my recollection is that the system allowed someone to advance without doing this. So that part has been addressed, but we still want to look and figure out, are there other people that have not signed? And so, that's usually the extent of, honestly, the extent of following up on these is you see the corrective action is in place. We have not done self-audits for this type of area. Where we have been focusing our self-audit, our self-improvement area is just the layers and layers of things we're trying to do to make sure toll accuracy. That when it comes to self-auditing, that's where our focus has been with Caption TransCore.
So my only suggestion there is, that's, I guess, a variant of an internal audit
Right.
function, so maybe something for the audit committee to talk about, given the magnitude of these contracts.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Deb.
Okay.
The next update is on bridge and tunnel property insurance coverage.
So I like to refer you to the spreadsheet that we've provided in the materials, and we'll just talk through this. This is an update item. So and this is property insurance, okay? We have other insurance policies as well. Our trust agreement requires us to carry reasonable insurance. And so part of reasonable to us is being able to make a business case as to what, what can make sense for us. And we have generally taken an approach, I think, similar to a lot of people take in their personal lives, is should an event occur, what can we weather through ourselves versus what can't we? The things we can't weather through ourselves are the things we need insurance for. But if we can manage the risk ourselves, then you're making the decision, is the premiums worth the cost to me if I can manage them? And that's been our approach. Now, one of the things that internal discussions that we've had is we don't have an insurance policy. And that is something that we're looking into. That may very well be a prudent thing to do, and we'll come back to the board. More than likely, we'll learn that that is a prudent thing to do, is have an insurance policy that will come to the board. So when we're talking about our property insurance, that's damage to the property as well as interruption insurance. And so the current coverage, we have a cap of $350 million for a single incident. An incident doesn't mean a single facility. Okay, so same incident affecting two facilities, it's the same bond, it's the same cap. Deductibles is 2% of the insured value, with a minimum of 1 million and a maximum of 15 million. And then from an interruption insurance perspective, there's a 10-day waiting period. And so those, last year, our premiums were $4.6 million. If we wanted to get the exact same insurance, our premiums would be $9.4 million, is what they would have gone up by. And the increase is a combination of two things. One is the value of our assets. OEC does work where they calculate the total insured value as well as a maximum foreseeable loss. And so that is one piece of the rising premiums. The other aspect of why the premiums have gone up so much is just the market in general. The industry, how many claims have they had, so everybody is seeing the increases, irrespective of the value of their assets. So we, for this year, nothing's offsetting. Both factors caused the premium to go up. There was no offsetting occurring whatsoever. So that, now at one point in time, we were looking at premiums as high as $16 million at one moment. The Treasurer's Office is the agency responsible for insurance, and they have a broker that works with them, helps shop insurance, and we believe at staff level worked very hard trying to get us reasonable premiums to the best that they could. And so after talking with the Finance Committee and getting their concurrence, we've changed our deductibles. We went what we're calling option 4. It's, if you look at table 2, and we still at the moment have the $350 million limit, but we've increased our deductible to $50 million and revenue to a 10-day waiting period. Okay? I'm sorry? 30. You're right, 30. Sorry about that.
Could you explain the waiting day period to me?
So the property insurance has interruption. So if something happened at the portal of the harbor tunnel, right, and no traffic could travel through, we would have a period of time where we couldn't collect revenue. So that is the waiting period before we can claim
Insurance, got it.
lost revenue.
Okay.
Okay, so we increased from 10 days to 30 days. And
Is
that's,
there a cap the other way? How long can you collect it after the 10 days or 30 days?
there is not a cap, but there's an overall incident limit
Of the 350. Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
Now, and that's resulted in a premium of $6.6 million. So, still, a decent increase, right, over the 4.6, but a fairly significant change in our deductibles. And we went this direction for a couple reasons. One is when we look at Table 3 and the analysis, so we have premium savings of $2.8 million. And then, the additional waiting time period, that's if we assume JFK, we assumed one of the higher generating facilities. We did not assume the Fort McHenry Tunnel because there are 3 other harbor crossings, so, we could potentially, those additional 20 days, be looking at $9.7 million. And then we have the increase in the deductible. So we asked the question, what could be our strategies? The first thing is, we can afford $50 million. And we also have to believe that if there was something so significant that was temporary, not permanent, because the whole thing about the property damage, it will be repaired, it will be back open. The belief that the board would take temporary actions if needed. So we have options, is the point. And one of those options is also to self-fund the $50 million. So if we funded the $44.7 million and we financed it, and then that money sitting in the reserve account, you're earning interest on that reserve account, the carrying cost is practically break even for us. And so that for that reason, we have options to be able to afford the higher premium, and therefore didn't feel like we should be paying, the additional, nearly $3 million per year to keep the deductibles lower. Insurance for us, we have to keep doing more work. We have to go back and look and make sure that there aren't assets that we're insuring that we really, in all honesty, should we be insuring? If, the nice Middleton Bridge, how it's constructed, the maximal foreseeable loss is $70 million plus interruption. Well, if our deductible's 50, should we insure that structure? We have to ask those types of questions. We have to ask questions like, considering the increase in the cost of the assets, is $350 million still the right limit for us? And so, with making changes for something like insurance, we think the changes need to be incremental. And so increasing the deductible is the first incremental step. I wish saying that funding the potential loss, the 44 million or 50, whichever number you want to use, I wish I could say that it was an easy decision to say, oh, just put it in the reserve. Because yes, that's cost neutral, but it also puts more pressure on our bond cap. And as Alan just said, we're approaching our bond cap. So all of these factors need to be weighed, but in the immediate, should we have a claim for which we've never had a claim, we can manage $50 million.
So thank you, because that was one of my questions, like, have we ever had a claim? That's, most of the time when we have disruptions, they're caused by other people, correct?
Yes.
And they're the ones who should be putting out their insurance.
Yes, the however.
Yeah, I know, that's,
The
I knew there
however
was a however, so I wanted to bring that up.
When, if
They're not gonna have $50 million worth of coverage, probably.
that's exactly right. I was just gonna say, like, we could list types of events that could occur that they're not gonna have that type, level of
But for a-
insurance.
But for a bridge, for example, it's likely gonna be somebody with a ship that runs into it and causes a problem that's gonna be of that magnitude. Don't they have that kind of insurance? I'm just asking, I don't know.
I don't know that answer, but
So I think what you said earlier about an insurance policy is probably something that we do need to focus on.
Well, in an instance like that, we likely have to subrogate because we want to get the facility running as quickly as possible. Then, using our insurance with the unintentional consequence there becomes that now you have an incident, so there's going to be a surcharge to the next year's policy as a result of using your insurance even if you're not involved. Right. It's your experience.
so, Chairman, you mentioned, MDOT, one of the things the Treasurer's Office mentioned to us is they're getting started on insurance for the state. It's time for them to do that. And so it is not, the challenges that we were facing, we face this every year, my impression was, the state as a whole, including MDOT, will see similar pressures.
Exactly. That's why I raised it. Yep. Very good. Yes, of course.
So Deb, assuming that there is no alternative solution that might be state generated or otherwise, we could expect to have this same conversation next year about it.
Yes, I believe we can, and we should anticipate it. That what our $50 million deductible and 30-day waiting period at, call it $6.6 million annually, we should expect that to be significantly higher, and that's also part of the continued work that we need to do. One of the things, and Jim Harkness and I, we've already talked about it, completely on board, the support that OEC gives finance in insurance is unbelievable, as well as Lynn Fry, the work that she does that helps in this area. We're going to have an independent asset evaluation, and because insurance, right, part of it's uncertainty. Some of these values, the broker, the insurance companies, they all buy into our methodology, but it's still us doing it. And so if having the independent assessment of their values takes a little bit of uncertainty off the table, hopefully that translates into better premiums. And to us, if the assets are accidentally undervalued, then that's still a benefit for us because, we're managing the amount of risk that we can afford. We could be subjecting ourselves to, challenges we weren't anticipating if our assets are undervalued.
Yep. Very good. Member Rosen?
Oh, first of all, I want to say it's commendable for you all to have 75 years without incident. And then secondly, is there a separate insurance for, this is property, is there a separate insurance report for other incidents outside of the property insurance?
We do. We've periodically, we've done a comprehensive update. There are aspects that are self-insured. There's terrorism insurance. We have, I think it's 4 policies. The challenging one is this one. Not that the other policies don't have increases, but they're not this order of magnitude.
Thank you.
Member Rosen?
So it sounds like we're headed toward creating a policy, and I agree with that. I think when we do that, and you're probably already anticipating this, we should look at what that, so right now the number is 44 million, that we're looking and using as a comparison point and compare that to what our potential max debt service. So, now we're at 2.2, 2.3, that's fine, we have capacity, it's kind of like a line of credit. But, and if in several years, at the end of our forecast, we're at 2.9. So, and at that point, the 44 is going to be 75 or some other number.
Right.
Which means if something catastrophic happens, obviously 75 when you only have 100, now we could have a problem.
That's right.
So we should take that into account when we consider our policy.
That's right, yeah. In the past, we've talked about we've gone a very long time period without raising tolls, very long time period. And, there's a lot of focus all the time on where are we from a debt service coverage perspective. But an impact of not raising tolls is the bond cap. That's part of what's driving us getting closer and closer to it. So I think you will hear us have conversations about the bond cap more and more.
Very good. Any other questions? Thanks, Debbie. That was very helpful, I think, for the entire committee. The next item is a Human Resources Committee update. Member Gaines?
everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. We met at the beginning of the month, the Human Resource Committee, and started with a update on our DEI program, and which basically described how we were introducing it to the employees through a newsletter and a lunch, and had a survey for them to fill out. And I think, everyone basically gave it a pretty good evaluation of where we stood, I guess you could say, for these issues. I know the administration is pushing the DEA on us, I guess, but I feel we should exercise caution as we go down this path. I mean, first of all, the MDTA already does a very good job of maintaining a diverse workforce according to race, sex, age, nationality. So I don't want to feel like we have to fix something that's not broken. DEI has brought negative consequences to various parts of the country, and one of which, for example, is I think our universities were one of the first to jump into the DEI head first, and I feel like their supporters have had a strong hand in influencing the deplorable condition of many of our universities through the admissions programs, hiring policies, and curtailment of free speech. Now, DEI proponents seem to have developed a partnership with Hamas supporters of all things. So we want to be careful if we don't go down that path. And I'm not saying we're likely to, but that's just, we have to understand it, I think. Another example of DEI negative, in fact, has been with the military. I mean, this has been introduced to our military academies and even the military itself. And the military itself has always been colorblind and merit-based. And now some of the DEI policies are creeping in there where you're not necessarily getting the best soldiers, sailors, and pilots promoted to lead the various branches of the military. Don't forget, the military exists to fight our enemies, not really to provide career opportunities. This is part of the reason there's a major shortage in recruitment budgets for our the Army is $25,000 short on their recruitment needs for this year, and the other services are having similar problems.
Member Gaines,
I'm not saying.
Member Gaines, this is the chairman. If you could you just keep it to the focus or MDTA's DEI program?
Right. Well, I just think we should be cautious where we take the program. I'm not saying we don't have to fight wars, but we do have to recruit workers, and we want to make sure that we're vigilant in any of the possible negative effects of DEI. I'd hate, for example, to see Secretary Whitfield have to list his favorite pronouns on his letterhead. That would be a bridge too far. Anyhow, back to the meeting. We heard about the recruitment and examination update and our efforts to reduce the vacancy rate, which I think we've been fairly successful with that. We've dropped 5 points from 19.3% to 14.3%. So, the governor, I think, wants to reduce it further, but it's sometimes easier said than done. You have a market you're working in, and how do you recruit more people? You raise the salaries, or reduce the quality of the applicant, which is not something we really want to do. So just work harder, and I think we're doing that. I got an update on the LIFT program, which stands for Leadership Investment for what is it T for?
For tomorrow?
For tomorrow, that's it. And we had, I think, 24 applicants for that program, and we had 15 participants. And think they're getting ready to move to phase 2, and I think it was very successful. And we heard an update on our career development program, which we're increasing the number of credits for 8 to 18 from 12. And I'm not sure how many people we have in that program now. Percy, do you, or Tanya, do you know how many are in there? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, Member Gaines, this is Percy Dangerfield, Acting Executive Director for the record. We'll have to get that information to you,
Right.
Mr. Gaines, yes.
It seemed like we were working to build it, so maybe it's not too crowded at this point. But anyhow, so that about concludes my meeting, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for my tangent there, but
Thank you, Member Gaines.
that's the way I feel.
Any
Mr. Chairman,
questions?
may I chime in for a second,
Yes, of
please?
course.
As a member of the HR committee, Member Gaines, I would just respectfully submit a different perspective on what was covered in that meeting from a DEI perspective. I think what was very explicitly mentioned was that the DEI efforts of MDTA sought to have that definition be broader than the thought process around race, gender, sexuality, what have you. I would argue that not just this agency, but any agency who supports an environment where you can have diverse, inclusive, and equitable discussion and perspectives being shared ought to be supported wholeheartedly and unequivocally with regard to this board or any other governing body. And I think it's very difficult at times, too, when you are not a member of a marginalized community to offer fair perspective on the value or lack thereof of DEI efforts, given historic marginalization of many groups, not just pertaining to race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, or what have you. So from that perspective, while I want to appreciate your perspective, I would hope that you also, from an inclusive and equitable perspective on your end, think through how the downside implications of what you said might impact not just the MDTA, but society writ large. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Carroll. Any other comments or comments?
I think there's intrinsic value in DEI training for those who want to have a better understanding of it. At my organization, I'm the chair of our DEI committee, and there's a lot more involved than assumptions placed in the national media, and it would really be beneficial for people to just get that education so they truly understand what DEI or IDEA types of efforts mean for the employment workforce.
Chairman? Thank you, Chairman. Again, Percy Dangerfield, Acting Executive Director for MDTA. Just wanted to add a little context about the DEI program here at MDTA. Statistically, we do have a very diverse workforce in terms of ethnicity and the things that are measured in what's called the civilian labor workforce with the state in different categories. However, here at MDTA, what we intended to do and what we've been able to do successfully at this point is be intentional about the equity and inclusion aspects of DEI. In those aspects of DEI, we found have actually broadened the experiences of our employees. It's been very well received, and it's also allowed our workforce to engage in these conversations through education. And while creating this inclusive environment, we have been able to directly associate that with increased engagement and retention efforts. So in the framework of what we've been doing at MDTA with respect to DEI, we've seen some very positive results, and we look forward to additional positive results as we grow the program. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you, Percy. I know in your previous role, a very large focus of your efforts. Thank you for everything you've done in that area. Any other comments or questions on this? If not, I'd like to turn to the final agenda item with the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Chair. Again, for the record, Percy Dangerfield, Acting Executive Director for MDTA. This month has brought some really unexpected challenges and changes. But the first thing I want to do is take a moment to express my gratitude and appreciation to everyone at the MDTA. I've had the honor of being part of MDTA for 10 years in a previous capacity. And I do want to acknowledge that my previous predecessor, Mr. Joey Sagal, was right when he said the heart of the MDTA never skips a beat because of everyone here. The organization has been overwhelmingly supportive and resilient, and they've been able to keep MDTA moving forward. So I did want to acknowledge that. I also want to thank our team that worked over the Thanksgiving holiday. They actually sacrificed time with their families to ensure the safety of our traveling public. So I also want to publicly acknowledge that. We've also received some very good news this past month about one of our projects. The Governor Harry W. Nice, Senator Thomas Mack Middleton Bridge Replacement Design Build Project was actually honored by the Design Build Institute of America. So really pleased to announce that. So DBIA or Mid-Atlantic Region awarded this particular project of the Year, Infrastructure Award of Excellence, and the Best in Design of Excellence. And at a national level, this project also won the DBIA Merit Award. So many employees worked on this significant project and contributed to the success. First of all, Chief Engineer Jim Harkness and his team, Heather Lowe, John Wiedemeyer, Jeff Davis, Dave Dykes, Ben Gilmore, Jim Davies, Brian Wolf, and Bill Randolph. They all played a role in making this a newer, safer bridge facility. So I do want to take time to publicly acknowledge their work and congratulate them on this honor. The project itself incorporated many firsts for MDTA, which included selecting a design build as the project delivery method, a 210-long, 66-inch diameter cylinder piles with carbon fiber pre-stressed strands, design and installation of a 200-ton precast bathtubs, and precasting 80-ton concrete drainage throughs. In addition, there were several unique sustainable practices which were included. We had the reuse of 18,000 cubic yards of Potomac River sediment, which was delivered to the Wyandotte Reclamation Site, which uses river mud to reclaim and transform over 100 acres of highly productive agricultural fields and wildlife habitat. Approximately 9,500 tons of materials from the original decommissioned bridge will be used to enhance the habitat, including transporting the old concrete to an artificial reef site. So we worked together with our partners and different partner agencies to perform seeding of over 100 acres on a 148-acre natural Lower Cedar Point bar. So this was quite an incredible feat and task, and we're very excited that MDTA was recognized for the work. So as mentioned in last month's board meeting, we actually held 2 open houses for the public to learn more about the 695 repairs and subgrade rehabilitation on Sparrows Point project. The information was presented at open houses, included the project limits, purpose and need, description of the work being performed, the project schedule, what drivers can expect during these traffic patterns for phases 2, 3A, and 3B, and Title VI information was provided for all materials were also translated into Spanish. The open houses were promoted via Facebook post on MTA's Facebook page, Esmere page, and What's Happening in Dundalk, and through print and digital ads in the Dundalk Eagle and Capital Gazette. The ads targeted residents and businesses in and around the Dundalk and Edgemere area. So we're pleased to work with the community and the local publications to get the word out about this important project. We've also dedicated a project website, mdta.maryland.gov, I-695 Sparrows Point Project, where information and updates about the project will be posted for any interested individuals to see. So I have just a couple other acknowledgments before closing. The first of which, very excited about, I'm actually pleased to announce to the board that we've hired a director of customer experience to lead the division. The gentleman's name is Mr. Jerome Watson, and he's here today with us. Is he still? He's in the back. Jerome, you have to sing for the board. I'm kidding. Although I've met Jerome, he's an extremely engaging professional, and I don't doubt when I said that he probably was thinking of a song to sing. But Jerome brings with him a private sector experience providing exceptional customer service from beginning to end, with a focus on delivering positive impressions at every external customer touch point. Jerome's division will be responsible for developing and sustaining a premier customer service culture, Drive Easy Maryland, engagement, outreach, and correspondence. He's currently studying for his MBA, as well as a certification as a customer service and customer experience professional. And most recently, Jerome worked for American Airlines, managing training and development, finance, data analysis, and customer experience. So we're really excited for Jerome to be part of the team, and we look forward to all the positive work he's going to do for us. A couple of more acknowledgments. The Department of Administration, which includes several of the administrative offices here, IT, HR, Safety Risk Management, DEI, Administrative Services, Civil Rights and Fair Practices, maybe a month ago, got together and did a training advance. The focus was stay interviews, trying to address retention and improve employee engagement. Member Carroll was our guest speaker there, and I wanted to publicly acknowledge and thank Member Carroll for his participation. Not only did he deliver very important remarks that dealt with leadership and cross-functional collaboration, he actually stayed for the entire event and at some point participated as a facilitator in the data collection. So that was very, very important, and we appreciate you, Member Carroll, for working with us. In addition to that, as mentioned before in the earlier report out, we had the LIFT program that was presented. And based on the LIFT program, Member Carroll also participated as one of the initial speakers, but I also want to acknowledge Member Gangini, who participated in our closing remarks. Once again, the board participation in these employee-based programs are extremely important, and it's very well received with the organization. So I want to thank you also, Member Gangini. So lastly, my final recognition is to announce and present the Employee of the Quarter Award for 2023 third quarter. Now, this particular employee was nominated by Selena McKissick and Natalie Henson. So every month prior to and during MDTA's monthly board meetings, this employee makes sure that everything is set up and is in working order prior to the start of the board meetings without being asked. He checks in throughout the day to see if the executive office needs any assistance. So during one of the most recent board meetings, within minutes of calling him, he was able to stop the roof work being done during our live stream and was able to reschedule until later in the day, which was extremely important. Earlier this year, he stepped up and helped during the Point Breeze Hot Dog Day event. Without being asked, he jumped in and started wrapping up orders, handing them out, and made several runs to get additional additional information and supplies. And this is greatly appreciated because it was a needed demand and outpacing our efforts to serve everyone. This employee makes every effort to provide maintenance and repairs quickly, safely, and in the most efficient way possible to ensure the comfort and safety of the Point Breeze staff. Within moments of a maintenance request, he's on site and he's ready to fix an issue. He regularly takes time to educate Point Breeze employees on how something works and how to maintain its performance. And I have to personally say that this employee has supported me again in any ask or any task. And I think what's really special about this is that he consistently goes above and beyond what his general scope of responsibilities may be to ensure that the board and the members of MDTA have what they need. And I think that's very important, and I'm glad to recognize the employee of the quarter is none other than our maintenance chief, Mr. Darrell Keys. Darrell's he's a 10-year MDTA employee. His commitment to his fellow employees and dedication to doing a good job, and willingness to be a team player makes Darrell an absolutely perfect candidate and recipient of the Quarter Employee Award. So Darrell, thank you, and please join us for a picture. Chairman, thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Percy. Okay, at this point, the agenda is complete. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very, very much, and thank you, Mr. Gaines, as well. That concludes the board meeting at 10:45, I believe that is. Thank you so much.